So, hi everybody. My name is Dean Foley, and welcome to Stories of Strength session. So, recognize, respond, and refer. So, this is a short little yarn session with Hannah, and yeah, just looking to increase awareness around key issues around domestic violence, and the purpose is community education, prevention awareness, and just helping better recognize the warning signs and to be able to respond safely and connect people with the appropriate support pathways. So, yeah, just a quick disclaimer: it's not a counselling session or legal, giving a legal advice, and not asking anybody to share personal details or sensitive information in the comment section with this video. So, without further ado, yeah, really pleased to introduce Hannah Taylor. Feel free to uh, virtually correct me. Your last name is
Oh, Hannah Taylor-Civitarese.
Civitarese? Yeah,
Yeah.
my apologies. But you're Camilleri or
Yeah.
Gamori or
Yeah. So I added my
Camilla?
husband's name onto mine because I refused to give up Taylor. So that's where the
Nice,
Civitarese is from. Yeah. Italian.
nice. And yeah, doing PhD in the School of Public Health Facility of Medicine at University of Queensland, and her focus is on the intersection factors of coercive control for First Nations women, and her research centers the voice of First Nations women. So, without blabbering on and going on, yeah, I'll hand it over to you, Hannah. But yeah, if you've got any questions, yeah, just or if you need me, just let me know.
Amazing. So thanks so much, Dean, for having me today to have a yarn. So my name, like Dean was yarning about, my name is Hannah Taylor-Civitarese. So I'm a proud Gamilaroi woman from Boggabilla Cunnamulla country up in Queensland, and I come to you today from Ghana country in South Australia. So thank you so much to the amazing people and the amazing people in Adelaide that have allowed me to live on this country, to work on this country and raise my children in this space. So as Dean mentioned, I am a PhD candidate, so currently in the write-up stage of my PhD on the intersecting factors of coercive control for First Nations women. And so I come to you today to have a really high-level yarn about coercive control and understanding the warning signs about looking and, worrying about if your mate or somebody is ever in need of these yarns and these conversations, or even yourself. I do just want to start out by saying that some of these conversations and the things that we talk about today may be pretty hard to hear, and I may say them quite quickly off my tongue. But I do just want to say that, my father, who's a proud Gamilaroi man, he always yarns up about being connected. So connected to yourself, other people, spirituality, and the earth. And when one of those is disconnected, we within ourselves feel sick and that disconnection. So I challenge us today to make sure that we're feeling connected. And if you need a minute to go outside and get your feet in the dirt or feel the sun on your face or the rain on your body, make sure you do that. Make sure you have a yarn with somebody else over a cuppa. Make sure you connect to yourself internally and your ancestors and spirituality. So I do just want to make sure that we're always staying connected and looking after ourselves, which is super important in this work and this role. So I come to you today as a social worker and a coercive control expert. I do just want to say the reason that I can do this research is because of the amazing ancestors that have gone before me, and also the voices of the women that I have been honoured to partnership with this research through. And so it's their voices that we hear today and their songs that we hear sung through this research. I do just want to say the reason that I got into researching about coercive control, I'm not an academic by trade. My family did laugh a lot when I told them that I'd started a PhD and I applied for one, is because coercive control is such a westernized concept. And when I talk about it, it is within the Western constructs of coming from England, coming from Wales. And Evan Stark, who coined the terminology around coercive control, he really brought it from those westernized countries into Australia, and it really didn't fit, and it doesn't fit for our First Nations community. And so I got real riled up about the fact that our voices weren't being heard, we weren't at the table, and also it would lead into the misidentification of our communities, which is already high rates as it is. So I didn't want it to be weaponized against us, and so therefore we started this journey of research into what else coerces and controls First Nations people. And so what I'm going to talk to you today is specifically about the warning signs and what you can see in relation to coercive control. So coercive control is what I would, in the high level conversation, I would say it is when somebody tries to have power, control, and domination over a person. So it's an underlining pattern and an underlining theme of all domestic and family violence. So when you hear about physical violence, sexual violence, financial, psychological, cultural violence, the underlining theme throughout these whole entire things is coercive control, which is a pattern of behaviour that occurs over a period of time with the intention to cause harm on a victim survivor. I do identify that I use gendered words in these conversations, and I use man as perpetrator, and I often use woman as a victim survivor. That's not to say that men don't experience domestic and family violence, and that's not to say that the victims are always female. However, in the research, it does identify that men are more likely to be the perpetrators of domestic violence. That is also, I also want to say that I use the gendered focus, and I do apologise because that's not including our sister brothers and our brother boys and brother girls. Oh my God, brother boys and sister girls as well. Please cut that bit out. And so I do acknowledge that domestic and family violence, coercive control occurs in our LGBTIQA+ community as well. And so I will try not to use the gendered natures. However, they do just slip off the tongue. So I'm learning as well. So like I said before, coercive control is a pattern of behaviour a perpetrator uses. Coercive control is a pattern of behaviour over a period of time with the intention to cause harm and hold somebody's autonomy over them. So it is when a perpetrator uses power, control, and dominance over a victim survivor. They attack their identity, their self-autonomy, their self-determination, and their strength. So when we yarn up about in terms of like, well, what are the warning signs? People always ask me, what are the warning signs? What have I got to look out for? You know, there's so many for people for their personal life. How do I meet somebody that's not going to try and coerce and control me on Tinder or all of the different apps? Or how do I know that somebody isn't love bombing me? I always start by saying, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. We've been taught, especially as people that identify as women, we've been taught to gaslight ourselves and our third eye or our gut instincts over time, so we don't even believe ourselves, and we know something doesn't fit or sit right. However, we just think, oh, no, I'm just being overprotective. Nah, I've got trauma. Nah, I've got this, I've got that. We belittle the reasons away. However, if you're on a date or if you're in a situation, if a friend is in a situation or somebody is in a situation and you say to them, does it feel good? Does it feel right? And if they're like, I'm not sure, then it probably isn't right. If something doesn't sit well, it probably isn't right. And so never discredit your gut instincts when you're in these situations, because 10 out of 10 times, they're probably correct. And sometimes, you know, as a First Nations woman, our ancestors are talking to us and giving us warning signs. So if something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. So often when people start a relationship, we become encompassed by the person. You want to hang out with the person every second of every day. You have all of these amazing dopamine hits going around, all of these chemicals in your brain, and you feel like this person has become your world. What happens in a relationship where there's an underlying pattern of coercive control is that person, the perpetrator who's using coercive control tactics to have power, dominance, and control over you, they will bring you up, and they will, in terms of love bomb, so they will tell you everything that you want to hear. They'll mimic your beliefs and your value systems. If you say you like long walks on the beach, oh my gosh, I do. If you say that you like certain movies, oh my gosh, all of a sudden they have the same and appreciations. And so it's almost just like, I'm a very visual person, so they'll build you up and take you really, 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 really high on this piece of string, and then all of a sudden drop you. So violence doesn't start, and abuse doesn't start at the beginning necessarily of the relationship. People don't go on a date often, not all the time. Sometimes this does happen in a long-term relationship that a perpetrator is using coercive control. The relationship doesn't start off as violent or abusive. It happens over a period of time because it is a pattern of behaviour. And so the person that is using these coercive control tactics will bring this person up, and like I said before, they will drop them. It's like an intense roller coaster ride. And what a victim survivor will do is they'll just say, oh my gosh, I hear this so often. We had this really wholesome time at the beginning. It was really beautiful. I want to get back there. I know that he is this really amazing person over here, and we had such a beautiful time. However, when I do things like, or I wear certain things, or, he drinks or something, it disconnects that time. So what do I need to do to get back here? And I just want to say, this part of this wild ride of this love bombing, a perpetrator that is using coercive control tactics is a facade. This whole mirage doesn't exist, and it is not a factual space to base a relationship on. So I often hear, victim survivors saying, if I can just change my behavior, or, if I was nicer, if I just stopped talking to this guy or this person or my family or something, then we would be able to get back to this really wholesome time. And I often tell people, before that time, when you just met them, did it feel right? Was there something in your gut that said, hang on, this is not a safe space? And 9 out of 10 times the person will be like, yeah, it doesn't fit, it doesn't feel good, it doesn't feel right. But, and I'm like, but in that how much of yourself are you compromising? And so just a reminder, that facade does not exist. That space that they live in does not exist. And it's almost like a perpetrator will use a Jenga kind of concept to, how you play Jenga and you pull out all of the pieces and it becomes quite unstable. They pull the pieces of Jenga out and they insert them with their lies and the belief system that they want that victim survivor to have, and then they pull it and the things fall down. And the only time that I've seen perpetrators try and go back to that facade and that mirage is when the victim survivor is thinking about leaving, or is saying, I'm actually not loving this relationship. They will go back to that space and give them a high. So it's also called the cycle of violence and the power and control wheel. So if you ever wanted some late night reading, have a look at those ones. So other signs to look out for is feelings of isolation. So a coercive control perpetrator, remember, they want to gain power over the person, they want to gain control, and they want to gain dominance over the person. They'll do that through isolation. So isolating them from their friends, isolating them from their family, from their community, from cultural ways of doing things, from cultural days. So things like NAIDOC, not allowing them to go and celebrate with community, because disconnection means that victim survivor is more dependent on the perpetrator and the person using those coercive controls. So if they can, there's amazing apps nowadays in relation to how a person can be coerced and controlled. So text facilitated abuse is something that I always warn people about around, there is no need to share your Snapchat location 24/7 with different people, especially somebody that is a perpetrator, or your Life 360, or all of those different concepts and different apps and location devices. Because why does a person need to know where you are all the time? If it's in terms to protect you, well, there's other ways in which that can happen. And who holds the power, who holds the control, and who holds the dominance? So, and in terms of, other things, like the perpetrator may call the victim survivor's workplace all the time, and that is a form of control, but also to cause financial abuse, because the person may lose their job and therefore be more dependent on the perpetrator. What a perpetrator is trying to do is attack someone's autonomy, their self, their identity, their cultural identity, and their connections. Because if that victim survivor becomes dependent on the perpetrator, they hold the power, they hold the dominance, and they hold control. And I always tell people in relation to, and this is just my view, not as an academic, but as a mum, as a wife, as a woman, as a proud Aboriginal woman, in no other relationship, often I hear people say, we're going to share bank accounts straight away because we want to be open and honest with each other. Well, in no other relationship ever is a person expected to share and hold a bank account with somebody else. It's only in intimate partner relationships that a person there's this unspoken rule that you need to then share bank accounts. I definitely believe in financial independence, and will always advise, no matter what type of relationship you're in, to always hold your own money, always hold your own accounts, always hold things for yourself, and you don't necessarily have to divulge and disclose them all the time. So other things to look out for, again, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. The perpetrators are subtle. So they use subtle things to kind of take somebody else's, like to pull down somebody's identity and take a hold of who they are. And they do that through mocking. So often it's just passed off as a joke. If a victim survivor has told that perpetrator something really intimate, they can often use that in a public space as a form of mocking. And so they can mock the victim survivor about their culture, about the knowledge that they do or don't have, about their parenting, especially if that is a very big part of their identity. They will start to attack the key aspects of that victim survivor's identity. So things as culture, mocking culture, if they're non-Indigenous, mocking their Indigenous culture and their connections, mocking their community, mocking their knowledge, mocking them as a person and casting it all off as a joke. Because if you attack someone, if you come back with somebody that's having a joke, you're just like, well, it's just a joke. And then the person, the victim survivor, is gaslit to, push back and to calm down. So it then starts to attack their identity and break that down. So the perpetrator will mock the person consistently. This can happen indoors, this can happen outdoors. Remember, these are the beginning signs, because it doesn't always hit the quite intense levels of violence at the beginning. It happens over a period of time. So monitoring where the person is, isolating them, saying who they can't and can hang out with. Other forms of coercive control in terms of cultural ways is, I've heard often that a Indigenous man will take an Indigenous woman onto a men's business site where it's a sacred site for only men to go, and he will force her to be on that site, and which then impacts her mental health, which then impacts her connectedness to country and can impact her lineage consistently. And that is a form to control. The perpetrator can control what a victim survivor wears. And again, it starts through the subtle jokes. Are you really going to wear that? Like, maybe you should think about something different. And so all of a sudden, every single aspect of that victim survivor's world is coerced and controlled. So they can control their money, they can control who they spend time with, they control where they can go, they can control how much time they have with their kids. And then even in things such as reproductive and sexual coercion. Often I hear women that want to finish university, or they don't want to have children, or they want to wait and get things settled. And all of a sudden, what we call stealthing is a man can remove a condom and then have that woman is then pregnant from a sexual encounter. And she may not want necessarily to have the child. However, he has coerced and controlled her. And sometimes in those situations, that child is then obviously connected to him. And so it's another way in which he can coerce and control her. There's often ways in which we see older men with really younger women. And we know that the power imbalances are so great, and that perpetrator has already groomed her family to be that he is this shining star, he is a great person. And that's called image management, in the fact that to everybody else, he seems like this charismatic, amazing, beautiful person, whereas behind closed doors, he's exerting power, control, and dominance over the victim survivor. So that then when the victim survivor goes to potentially her family or other people and says, hey, I don't feel safe, he says these things to me sometimes, this perpetrator has already groomed all of these people to stand up for him and then discredit what she says, again, consistently continuing that gaslighting of her. So, he calls her job 20 times a day, which she could lose, and then again she'd be more independent on him. And so he wants to have dominance, control, and power over her. So he may get his family involved as well, so that they also exert power and control over her, over the situation. She may be on his country, so she may also then not have the power of being connected to her own country. She may be dependent on him and his family. And we see this often in our communities and also other communities as well. Because often if you're having a yarn with someone and they're talking about, I have to cook for him, I have to have the food prepared when he gets home, we watch what he wants to watch because that's what he wants to do. It's always asking them the question, okay, well, if you wanted to not cook or you wanted to watch something else, what would that look like? What would those conversations look like? And if she says, no, I enjoy cooking, I want to do that, then that's fine if that's that person's choice. But if she says, I actually don't want to watch whatever he's watching, I would love to watch something else, but we just don't go there. That can then show that there is potentially coercion and control being utilized in that situation. And remember, coercive control is not always physical violence. It is a pattern of behavior to control a person, to have power over a person, and to dominate a person. And part of my research is around colonization and coercive control, and the same behavioral tactics in colonization is the same tactics in coercive control, which comes to genders-based violence. And when we look at westernized gendered roles around cooking and cleaning and parenting, the woman always being the parent at home, the woman looking after everything, I always ask people, who holds the power, who holds the dominance, and who holds the control? Is it equal? Do you both sit in a situation where you're both holding the power? Are you both holding the control over all of the decisions? Are you both holding the dominance over all of the decisions and the financial decisions? Or are they all based on one person, usually the man, and what they want to do in the situation? And so I've seen these westernized roles become a way in which coercive control can continue through a relationship. So it's always asking those questions. If a person looks as though they are fulfilling westernized gendered roles, asking them, is that what you want to do? Is that how you want to parent? Do you want the partnership? And just having those yarns and those conversations as well. And I always come back to the fact that if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. If you have somebody that you are worried about or concerned about, you can always contact 1-800-RESPECT for a domestic and family violence framework of understanding to be able to have a conversation with or a yarn with and say, hey, I'm worried about my friend. You do not have to give them your name or your information. You can be anonymous. If you're looking for a culturally safe response, I always say call 13 Yarn. They can provide you with a culturally safe response in relation to what you're experiencing, or if you need some support. If anyone does want more training in relation to how to respond to First Nations people in relation to domestic and family violence, DV Alert provides free training for anyone on recognising, responding and referring around domestic and family violence. And so they have specialist training across the country as well. So I just want to come back, and I hope all my ramble made sense in the fact that if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. Never negate those warning signs. Never negate those warning signs for yourselves and for other people in the community as well. Be independent. Hold your own bank accounts. Hold your own space. You do not have to share your location with anybody, and you can continue to be independent. Sorry, Dean. I just saw you come on in.
Yeah, I jumped in too early. Sorry about that. Yeah, appreciate that. That was absolutely amazing. It's a lot of stuff in there, and just a random question, random thought, because there's a lot to take in. Like, is there like not like a questionnaire, but like people can like check and get like a response back to, like, what are they called? Like you take these, you fill out these forms and then it gives you back like your personality and that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like, is there one where you can complete and it gives you back like the risk levels or how much coercive control
a person is experiencing? No, I mean, that's a great idea. You can do web chat with 1-800-RESPECT. So if you're worried about certain behaviors, or if you're like, he makes comments or he doesn't let me go certain places, and it can be more subtle in the fact that, the reason the terminology gaslighting came from back in the day, he didn't live in the house, a perpetrator would turn on the light and then leave the premises. So she came home and there was always a light on. And so she's like, hang on, did I leave the light on? Didn't I? And she would criticize herself and critique herself to the point that she didn't believe and didn't trust herself whether or not she had or hadn't turned a light on. And that's where the term gaslighting comes from. And so to answer your question, you can go onto 1-800-RESPECT to see, is this what's happening? And it's always great to have a sounding board as well. I often ask people that, come to me and we have a yarn about DV. I have, quite often I'm talking about domestic and family violence, and I'll just say, how did you feel in the situation? How do you feel in the situation? Do you feel that you can, just exit here and do what you need to? Do you feel free to be able to go wherever you need to go? And it's often that people say, well, perpetrators are, they can't control. And I always come back to that and just say, well, actually, I've seen a lot of perpetrators control their tempers, control their violence, control the way in which what they say and the way in which they treat their victims, their partner in public. And so I do always say that they have the ability to control themselves. Violence and abuse and coercive control is never the victim survivor's fault. It's never the perpetrator is never theirs to heal. That person has to go off and do the healing with themselves, by themselves, with their community, with other people. And the victim survivor is never responsible for that person's behavior, for that person's coercive control, for that person's outburst. And so often I hear people say, oh, if I just didn't say X, Y, Z, or if I didn't do X, Y, Z, no. You can be who you are and the person that you are. They can be the person that they are. However, their behavior is never your responsibility. And in no other situation do you ever hear somebody mention what the victim survivor was wearing, what they were doing, how they were acting. I know you just asked one question, but this is just to go on to something else. So often we hear, the one punch kill campaign, and all of a sudden all pubs are shut down and they've got this massive campaign going on, which as they should. However, no one in that situation asked what the victim survivor was doing. No one was like, you never hear whether or not the victim survivor of the one punch was intoxicated, what they were wearing, how they were acting. It's just the focus is on the perpetrator, as it should be. It's only in intimate partner violence and domestic and family violence and sexual violence that the victim survivor is so incredibly scrutinized, which we need to stop. So I just wanted to make sure that I said that none of that perpetrator's behavior is the victim survivor's responsibility or fault. So yes, you can contact 1-800-RESPECT, sorry, to answer your question. Look at the different warning signs in relation to DV. But I just always challenge people is women know and men know, people know within themselves sometimes. We just minimize the voice or we silence the voice within us. But if it doesn't feel right, it isn't right.
And if the person themselves are struggling, with the daily struggles and not too sure, is there what does a referral or warm referral look like instead of
instead of what, sorry?
Oh no, yeah. Instead of just the individual, if somebody sees, sorry.
If somebody sees, so do you mean if somebody's worried about their friend or if they're worried about themselves or?
Yeah, I'm a bit ADHD, so probably both. How does a warm referral and also an external referral, how do people who aren't sure, do they ask questions? Can they report it or?
Yeah, so if you're worried about a friend or someone in the community and you're close and comfortable with them and you feel that you have the right words, sometimes you can have a talk to them, have a yarn with them, the victim survivor that is. Sometimes we get so worried about fumbling and saying things wrong. I often will ask friends and community and people how they feel in a situation, and you can watch when the phone rings a million times and you can see the person's body behavior changes and they get a little bit worried. Often in life there's stresses, absolutely. However, a person should not feel unsafe or they're minimizing themselves or making themselves smaller to fit into a relationship. People can be all that they can be and who they're called to be and who our ancestors have called us to be. And if that person feels like they can't put language to something, I just feel like he does, I can't put words to it. He just doesn't, he just does this stuff that makes me feel annoyed or, then unpack it with them. You guys can call 1-800-RESPECT together and just say, look, we just want a sounding board to have a look at these types of behaviors and see what is happening. And oftentimes that the situation where you can't necessarily put words to it is often coercive control, because you're like, oh, but he doesn't hit me. And that is not a catalyst. That is not a measuring mark for whether or not there is domestic and family violence. That is a part of domestic and family violence. And, you know, when women become pregnant, or when they want to leave, or when they have children, they're the most high risk times for that person. And so it's asking questions around safety and ensuring that they're safe. But I would always say, if you're ever in doubt, call 1-800-RESPECT. You can do web chat as well. And then, you know, if somebody's in immediate risk of harm, I would always say contact the police.
Yeah, thanks for that. And thanks for your time and invaluable knowledge. It's been amazing, and yeah, a lot to take in at times, but very important and much needed education session, awareness session. So yeah, really appreciate that. Thanks, Hannah.
Anytime. Thanks so much. If you've got any questions, find me.
Sure. Yeah, online. And do you have an academic profile?
I just have LinkedIn. I'm not that fancy, so or Instagram, you know.
Not an elite academic yet, so
no, thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Hannah. Yeah, appreciate that. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you.